No one goes to Hank's for his spreadsheets. They go for a darn good pizza. Lately, though, the shop's been quiet, so Hank decides to bring back the $1 slice. He asks Copilot in Microsoft Excel to look at his sales and costs and help him see if he can afford it. Copilot shows Hank where the money's going and which little extras make the dollar slice work. Now Hank has a line out the door. Hank makes the pizza, Copilot handles the spreadsheets. Learn more at m365copilot.com/work.
Saturday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Saturday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Saturday. Saturday, bring it on.
We're back. And listen, when you hear that music, you know that it's time to enter the dojo. And tonight, me and my good friend Chris, we are finally back in the dojo, man. Look, we were gone for a little bit, but now we're back again like we never left. And I'm pretty pumped up for this episode, Chris. We've been away, but we've been grinding in the shadows, man. We've been pumping out these mock drafts. Thanks and shout out to BlueChip, the sponsor of this show, and a proud partner of the Devy Dojo. We've been able to get that done. And Chris, I don't know about you, man, but I've been so ready to get back into it. I think some of the people in the Discord have been pretty ready for this too. Those of you who have joined us in these mock drafts, a lot of them have been DMing me saying like, hey man, when are you guys going to get back in and talk about some of these players? So tonight is the night. But Chris, my friend, man, you were down for a little bit with that flu. How you feeling tonight?
Yeah, dude, it was rough for a bit. I was out down for the count with the flu. And then unfortunately, my son, who's only 2 years old, he had the flu too. I thought he was going to escape it, but he caught it right at the tail end of my flu. So it ended up being like a 2-week ordeal with, me having it and then him having it. So I didn't get to do any of the fun Easter activities. He was out there doing all of his egg hunts and, all the fun stuff. And as soon as that was over, he was sick. So doing good. And like you said, we've been grinding mocks. We've been doing tons of mocks on the Devy landscape, the C2C landscape. We've done mocks like crazy thanks to BlueChip. And we're ready to just talk about some of these guys because that's the heart of Devy. We did a lot of rookie stuff earlier in the year, and now we're talking about just Devy guys. And I'm sure we'll get a little bit more rookie content for you guys here in the future as we approach the draft. But we got to get back to the roots, man. This is the Devy Dojo. Let's talk about Devy guys.
The great thing about what we've been doing is we have now like a more centralized location for some of this Devy ADP. If you've been grinding in these streets for these past few years, you've been having to go on spreadsheets, rely on other people, maybe pay something behind a paywall to get access to this. And now you don't need that, right? We have a place where we can all come together and start mocking. And so very excited about this to release the very little caveat here, the very early Devy offseason ADP 1.0 per Devy Dojo. Those of you in our community who have been mocking with this. So Chris, without further ado, let's go to the unanimous and consensus 101 for our ADP.
Standing alone in his own tier is Jeremiah Smith, the easy 101 in Devy mocks. He's been obviously the most commonly taken person at 101 in our Devy mocks recently because of these beautiful stats you see here. I mean, if you've followed the dojo or really any, Devy content, anybody talking about the future of rookie, he has been the man for a while, and he was great in his freshman year, and he was great in his sophomore year, even with Carnell Tate aside him. 6'3", 223 pounds, big bodied wide receiver, this is his content, or this is his stats from the last 2 years. So 2,500 yards, 27 touchdowns, 3.28 yards per route run, and astronomically good, less than 2% drop percentage. There's so many stats that you could pull up for Jeremiah Smith that show why he has been the god of Devy for the last few years. But he really has shown over the last, freshman, sophomore years, why he's going to be the 101 in 2027. This man is the guy we've been waiting for. He's the wide receiver of the future. There's been a lot of good wide receivers that come out of Ohio State. Some of them have been fantastic. Some of them have not so far. I'm talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. Still maybe the future.
Hey, third-year breakout.
Yeah. We'll see. But Jeremiah Smith is really the guy. Like, he's the one that you want to hone in on. There's a good reason that he's getting taken at 101 in Devy mocks.
Yeah, I think some people might have slight questions about what this offense is going to look like now with Brian Hartline gone. Is it going to impact their recruiting? I don't think so. I think that the brand does a lot of that recruiting for them as well. No shade at Brian Hartline. He was an incredible recruiter, but the beat goes on, and I expect this third year for Jeremiah Smith potentially to be his best. He's going to get a second year Julian Sain in a new system, but a second year starter in Julian Sain, who I also expect to take a little bit more of a leap, and that was a Heisman contender right there. So not surprised to see him go here. In every single mock draft that we did for this, Jeremiah Smith was the 101 every single time. He's locked and loaded in a tier of his own. So, I mean, we don't need to spend too much time talking about Jeremiah Smith. He's the GOAT. By mid-September, he's probably going to break several Ohio State receiving records. I mean, the dude's just incredible. At the end of this third year, I fully anticipate his production profile to be among some of the best that we've seen in recent history. Actually, real quick, Chris, before we move on, we've done a couple combined startup drafts where it's, the Devy picks in with the NFL guys. We've seen him go as high as 102 in that draft. I personally feel a little comfortable taking him maybe before Amon-Ra St. Brown in draft. So maybe about like the 112, 201 in a combined startup. Where would you personally, if you were drafting right now, where would you take him in a combined Devy startup?
Yeah, that's about where I would take him. Maybe even, and I love Malik Neighbors, but maybe like roughly the Neighbors area. And maybe that's my own bias because I appreciate Neighbors. I think he's great. And we've seen, especially now, everybody does super flex. We're starting to see those kind of wide receivers with elite talent go towards the back end of the first round, the early second round. I would take him right there in the early second round if he falls to you. Like, if you have one of those turn picks and you can nab somebody that fell to you pretty early at the end of the first round and then grab him the start of the second, I mean, that's easy button for me.
Love it. Well, now before we move on, I think it's important that we take a quick moment to shout out somebody that we already have today, and that is our sponsor of the Devy Dojo, BlueChip, provided to us by the great Will Stone. But today, he literally just dropped an update with updated C2C ADP and some updated Devy ADP, along with CFF ADP to go along in there. If you go in your home tab, you're now able to go and join mock drafts in there, which is incredible. There's truly, the community around this has been awesome. Obviously, it's something that we've been clamoring for. So if you're a Devy freak, right, if you're a C2C fanatic, if you just love college football and are interested in joining, then make sure you join the Devy Dojo Discord. It's free. You're going to be able to hop in there with us. You'll be able to talk to Will Stone himself, of course, us and all the other members of the Devy Dojo, and hop in on some mocks with us, man. That's really, BlueChip is what powered the content behind tonight's episode. So if you're interested in joining, the links are going to be in the description of this episode and right there on the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, we can't say enough about Will Stone and BlueChip. And I have heard from a birdie that he's going to even have NFL stuff going on BlueChip here very soon. So it's going to be the future, I think, of a lot of these C2C and Devy drafts. And hopefully it will be up to snuff to even take out some of those other, if you're like me, you hate sleepers. So hopefully soon it'll be NFL content as well. So It's the future of Devy. It's the future of C2C. We love Will Stone. We love BlueChip. It's a great product. And that's exactly what you said. It powered all of our mocks that we've done here on this content today. So looking forward to the future of BlueChip.
Yes, sir. We have several Devy leagues that we're in that fully plan to transition very shortly as soon as they get the NFL players in there, because we're able to just host everything in one spot. And that is the beauty and the vision of BlueChip.
Absolutely. Moving on to our tier 2. So these are names that everybody who has been a fan of Devy Dojo should be familiar with. ADP wise, they have shaked out a little bit different than I might have expected, but we have Malachi Toney, Cam Coleman, Arch Manning, DeCorian Moore, and Bo Jackson coming in at our tier 2. So rounding out our top 6, this is where they've all landed ADP wise. And I'm a big fan of all of these guys, of course. But personally, I've been taking Arch Manning a lot higher than Cam Coleman. And even in some points, I've been taking Malachi Toney behind Arch Manning, depending on where I feel like my teams need it. Because I love Arch Manning. And I know I've been teasing this article that I never actually put out on our Substack for a long time. But Arch Manning, to me, you know, he went through that whole up and down last season, but he's always been really good as a dynasty prospect, Devy prospect, because, of course, the name. But he's a fantastic passer, and he's also got that rushing ability behind him. So the fact that, I mean, he is technically tied here with Cam Coleman at 4.0. But the fact that he hasn't risen higher on our own mocks has been a little bit crazy to me, because I think he's like kind of the easy button at 2. Like if you're not taking Jeremiah Smith, you're the second pick, just take Arch Manning, man. He's guaranteed to get first round draft capital, in my opinion. And he's going to be a future stud at the NFL level. And quarterback is so valuable, right? We want quarterbacks in Superflex leagues. Look at where Fernando Mendoza is going right now in rookie mocks. It's crazy to me that he's going ahead of the big 3 in a lot of rookie mocks, big 3 wide receivers, I should say. I want Arch Manning. I don't want Fernando Mendoza. I want a guy that has a little bit of, rushing value behind him that Mendoza doesn't have. I want a guy that has that name recognition. There's no chance in my mind that Arch Manning is going to fall in value any further than he did last year.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because what always makes quarterbacks so tricky in Devy is it's sometimes difficult to gauge their valuation, and they're just so volatile in terms of value, right? We know that at a drop of a hat, they can fall and lose value. I don't see that with Arch Manning. And today, actually, in the Discord, we had a really good discussion and discourse around this, because there is still that narrative around Arch Manning, that he was just awful and terrible. And while, yes, we've been very critical of his mechanics early to start the season, I think some of that narrative has hung still a little bit of a cloud around his value. We know obviously how he finished. He looked much better throughout the course of the season, especially the way he ended it against Michigan in a bowl win. He almost hit 22 miles per hour on that 60-yard touchdown rush against Michigan to end the season. So they ended it on a high note. And now you have a guy in Cam Coleman who's right there going with him, someone that I'm obviously very high on. That fits a need that they needed. They needed that outside X vertical wide receiver to really round out this offense. Now, the question around Texas is going to be the offensive line. Can they give Arch Manning, who was one of the leaders in the Power 4 in terms of his big time throw rate and his PFF grade in deep shots down the field? That's where Cam Coleman is going to excel as well. So if the offensive line can give them time, allow him to hit those deep shots, man, you get Cam Coleman start displaying the R at the catch point. I really expect a very big year from both of these two. For me, it's tough at the 102. All of these guys, except for DeCorian Moore and Bo Jackson, have gone 102 in some of these mock drafts at some point. There's been a lot of variance, and it really depends on the drafter. But I do like what you said about Arch Manning, Chris, in that you don't expect his value to dip. And we know that with quarterbacks, it can. But having the Manning last name, having the traits, having that Konami upside, or at least just the rushing utility at the next level, is going to be huge. I always want those quarterbacks that can rush, man. And he's a little swaggy guy out there, man. Like, you hear Manning and you think of his uncles, and he's just not that guy. He's out there stunting like his granddaddy, running around. If he has developed and taken his game to the next level, the national exposure that they get, the natural brand of Texas and his last name, it all equals out to a likely first overall pick in 2027. And today somebody said, well, could Jeremiah Smith overtake him? Could he be drafted higher than him in the NFL draft? And I do think that's possible. But you have to remember the positional value in the real NFL draft. And I think a team starving for a quarterback is going to be hard-pressed to pass on a mobile Manning.
Yeah, I think it's when you talk about the NFL draft, I think for sure there's a chance that Arch goes 101 and, we're talking about Jeremiah Smith not going 101. But where's it going to land with dynasty value? That's the real question. And that's a question I'm not really equipped to answer at this point. Jeremiah Smith obviously is the guy that everybody knows has a great ceiling and a great floor. But Arch Manning could really prove this year that he's worthy of the 101. We've seen guys like Cam Warden Mendoza go 101 in the NFL draft recently. And now we got people talking about Mendoza going 102 in dynasty drafts. That's not something that I'm willing to do. But Arch Manning, certainly I'm willing to take him at 102 next year, maybe 101, if you really need a quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how this year shakes out. And of course, having Cam Coleman now transferring to Texas is going to be great for him as far as having a downfield threat. Like you said, that's your catchphrase, R at the catch point. That's Cam Coleman's go-to value. And then of course we have Malachi Toney here. We can't glass over him. He's a fantastic wide receiver, and he's somebody who I've seen in C2C mocks going even higher than Jeremiah Smith, which I can see. I think I might have done it myself because he put up so much gaudy numbers last year at Miami, and now he has Darian Mensah throwing him the ball. So it's just wheels up for Malachi Toney as far as having a good quarterback behind him, showing what he can prove. The big thing for me with Malachi Toney is his size, right? He's not as big as Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith is a specimen. Malachi Toney is, 5'10", 180, 85 pounds. So a little bit undersized, but he has shown us his ability to run routes, to carve out routes for his quarterback, and absolutely dominate in the college football landscape. So he's got nothing but room to grow at this point. I would just like to see a little bit of size impacting, his body before he gets to the NFL.
Yeah, and I understand hesitation behind that, but the good news for Malachi Toney is that God blessed him with a lot of other talents. One of them is the route running, just the pure dog nature in him. He's one of those guys that definitely had flying. He passed the dog test, flying colors, and that's why I'm yelling at it like, what are you going to do? You're going to show me that you're a dog? And he just went out there, 17-year-old true freshman breakout. Those are all strong, very strong indicators of future success. So a lot of good stuff to like in his profile. My favorite thing about Malachi Toney is that he's a PPR machine. You mentioned him going higher than Jeremiah Smith in CFF drafts, and that's because of all the receptions that he got and the touchdowns that he got. He scored a lot of points out there for college fantasy formats. And so I kind of get the reasoning there. I still obviously would take Jeremiah Smith ahead of him in Devy and in Dynasty. But in terms of rankings, and this is a little bit of a sneak preview for next week, I actually have Malachi Toney as my Devy wide receiver too, because I just like the trajectory. I think that he still has a frame to add a little bit of functional mass. Now, he's never going to be the biggest guy out there, but it's okay because he doesn't win in that way. He's primarily going to be lined up in the slot. But as I put on Twitter, little clip out there, against Virginia Tech, they put him in the backfield, kind of like the Seahawks were doing with JSN at times. And he took advantage of this linebacker. He cooked him on an out and up, and he was gone, dude. Miles of separation. If Beck could have just put a little bit more under it, he would have been gone. He probably still would have been running to the house at this point. Nobody was near him. But of course, it was Beck. He struggled with the vertical passing game down the field, deep down the field with his accuracy. He was running to his left. He underthrew it. But Malachi Toney, again, he's also great at tracking the ball and coming back to the ball. And we saw that week 1, I believe, against Notre Dame, or whenever they played Notre Dame, excuse me. He had to come back to the ball and make a big play for a touchdown. So you can line him up all over the field. You just get the ball in his hands. He even took snaps at quarterback because we know in high school he played some quarterback. He had 2 passing touchdowns. They just handed the ball off to him. He's a do-it-all type of guy, and he's a dog. So I get it. he's my 102. He's who when I've been at the 102, I've typically taken Malachi Toney.
It's hard not to at this point, right? Like I said, I like Arch Manning, but as far as wide receivers go, taking Toney and not taking Cam, I get it.
Obviously, so we see DeCorian Moore right there, and he's a guy that his Devy value has remained pretty solid throughout his freshman season. Obviously, he was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school. He was the number 1 rated recruit coming out of high school, flipped from LSU, went to Oregon. It was a really big signal for them to get a wide receiver of that caliber to that program, to the Oregon Ducks. And now we have Dante Moore, another year of experience in that system as a starter, and DeCorian Moore alongside there, another year in this program. I shouldn't say offense because Will Stein has now left. Obviously, he took a head coaching job. So now the question is, how can the new offensive coordinator incorporate him? Because Oregon has primarily been known to run the ball. Last year, they had a trio of good backs. Obviously, they returned Jordan Davidson. They have De'Aaron Hill. Are they going to continue to pound the rock and then kind of hit them over the top? I don't know what this offense is going to look like. I know the Oregon fans in our Discord are pretty happy to see Will Stein gone because I think that they're expecting more vertical passing, kind of let it rip, right?
As someone who sends a lot of mail and a lot of packages to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, I can't tell you how much time shipping takes out of my day. With ShipStation, you can basically let shipping go on autopilot because it's just that easy now. ShipStation's intelligence-driven platform brings order management, rate shopping, inventory and returns, warehouse systems, and comprehensive analytics, saving customers 15 hours per week on fulfillment. Because ShipStation compares rates across all the major global carriers, including your own discounted rates if you have them, to find the best possible shipping option on every order with discounts up to 90% off. This is why 1 million businesses trust ShipStation. So try ShipStation for 60 days with full access to all features. No credit card needed. Go to ShipStation.com, use promo code PLAYER for 60 days for free. 60 days gives you plenty of time to see exactly how much time and money you'll save on every shipment. That's ShipStation.com, code PLAYER. ShipStation.com, code PLAYER.
And if that happens, if DeCorian Moore could stay healthy and continue to see those snaps, now we might see an increase in production. Again, the good news is that dip in production hasn't allowed his value to dip. And I think that goes along with good Devy game theory here. I like to invest in wide receivers primarily heavily in drafts because they don't lose that value. And typically, you got a good success in hit rate at the NFL. You can trade them for additional assets, or you could just hold that value and hope that you get a first round pick. Whereas with quarterbacks, you have the volatility, Manning or whoever, if they don't have a good first year, you kind of see that value start to dip. Dylan Real is a very good example. When he entered as a recruit, who's highly recruited or ranked in Devy, he was taken high in a lot of Devy drafts. And then after 2, mediocre seasons, his value has now dipped all the way down. So I get the pick here with DeCorian Moore. I think it's a little high in my rankings. I have him a little lower, still very high on him, still love the talent. I've comped him to a young Reggie Wayne with his ability to kind of not high point, but just this springy athleticism in the air and the ability to focus and really reel the ball in. I saw again in what was it? Was it versus Wisconsin? I believe in my film review, I saw a ball that was tipped, moved along the sidelines, and he was able to keep both feet inbound. So it would have been an NFL level catch and catch it along the boundary of the sideline for a ball that got tipped. And it was, the weather wasn't the best. So he displays that level of focus and ability to track balls in. So if we could just get him on the field more, I would love to see that. Did you have any thoughts on DeCorian Moore, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dante Moore is a guy who I have notably been down on and then revisited that. I walked completely back on my hate on Dante Moore. And now if DeCorian Moore is going to be his wide receiver 1, exactly what you said, he's always open for him. And it's going to be a great offense for him to perform in. And Dante Moore is a guy who I think would have been maybe 101 if he had come out in this draft. I think we were expecting him to maybe do that, and he decided he's going to go back to Oregon for another year, which might be better for his overall development. But it's great to see him have a guy like DeCorian Moore there to be his open receiver downfield, especially. So DeCorian Moore, I think, is absolutely fantastic wide receiver prospect. He's been a guy who's been on our radar at the Devy Dojo for a long time. But I do tend to agree with you. I'm not sure that I would have taken him this high, and I haven't. His ADP is not because I've been the one that has been drafting him this high, but I do like Corey Moore as like a late first round Devy pick. 7.1, not quite where I'm taking him, but if you can get him at the 10 or the 11, the back end of the first round, I love that. Bo Jackson is our next guy on the list, and he's a guy who we have been highlighting for a little while. I think we talked about him in our freshman fever episode way back in like September or something. Bo Jackson's a guy who I loved his high school highlights, and he's proven now at this point that he can do it against Big Ten defenses. And he's going to be the running back 1 at Ohio State, which is always a position that we need to highlight as, Devy guys looking forward to the future. He shows that he has a lot of power, and I've seen some elusiveness out of him at the high school level. I'm not sure I've seen quite as much lateral movement at Ohio State yet, but the whole nother offseason under his belt, I think he's going to be a little bit more fluid with his hips, a little bit more comfortable with the play calls and show us a little bit more of that lateral movement. But he does show that north to south power that we like to see out of running backs, the classic, Bo Jackson's his name, right? Or Lamar Jackson, if you want to go by his Christian name. But you want to see like a little bit of a toughness to him, and he's got a fantastic game behind him as far as a running back. So he shows the things that you want out of a 3-down running back at the NFL level. And as the running back 1 at Ohio State, he's somebody who's always going to be on our radar at Devy.
Yeah, he's Devy RB1 for a lot of people. He's not that high for me, but I really love the profile. You talked about both of us highlighting him on our freshman fever episode back at the very beginning, origin story of the Devy Dojo. He was one of the first guys that we really talked about. I didn't anticipate him to pretty much immediately become the starter. I think both of us thought James Peoples and CJ Donaldson would kind of take that work. And look, Bo Jackson came in and took the job, and he never looked back. Over 1,000 yards rushing in his freshman season, 6 touchdowns. You talked about his toughness and the grit and the ability to get yards after contact. PFF has him at 733, and that's pretty good for a guy who didn't start immediately week 1. So I understand the value he's on a good offense. So I understand the uptick in value that you see. 107 is still a little high for me. I think that personally there's just some other profiles I'd rather invest in, but I get it and I like it with Devy. These running backs, if I hit on them, I'm typically looking to sell, but I think that Bo Jackson has enough name value, brand value, that artificial value that he's going to continue to rise if he takes that another big step in. I should highlight this, in an Arthur Smith offense for Ohio State. A lot of Ohio State Buckeyes fans, while of course we anticipate them to still pass the ball down the field, Brian Hartline is no longer there, and he's not calling those plays. And I do anticipate Arthur Smith to incorporate the run even more. They got a really good offensive line, so I think it's wheels up for this kid. And I can easily see him overtaking Devy RB1 for me next year. But as you know, I still got a couple of other guys slightly ahead of him. And of course, the proximity to the draft does matter to me. Bo Jackson wouldn't be draft eligible until 2028. So I think I'd rather invest in some wide receivers who are up in 2027. And they might be in this next tier.
They are, including some of the running backs I think that you prefer over Bo Jackson, including Keewan Lacey. But you can see here Ahmad Hardy, Xavier Crowell, Dante Moore, Keewan Lacey, Chris Henry Jr., and Bryant Wesco, and then Nick Marsh round out our tier 3 based on ADP. And I agree with you. We've talked about Devy. The best thing to do is invest in wide receivers because they usually have the best return on value when you're taking them this high, especially. But if you're going to take a running back, you want to take a guy like Keewan Lacey, who has proven that he can do it at the collegiate level, and not necessarily a guy like Xavier Crowell, who I get why people like him, but I'm kind of shocked at his ADP at this point. He's not a guy who I would ever take this high.
No, I think and I'm glad you touched on that, Chris, because that's a point that I really wanted to hit. I love Xavier Crowell. I expect him to do wondrous things. He's still too much of an unknown for me to take ahead of some of these guys who are also closer to the NFL draft. And of course, that's what you really got to focus on. Maybe in C2C formats, I'd consider it. Probably not, because Kawan Lacey was ultra productive. He doesn't have Lane Kiffin there calling the plays, and we know Lane Kiffin loves a workhorse, but he showed he's a good receiver out of the backfield. Kawan Lacey, that is. He's going to get a high volume of touches. I still anticipate him to be the number one guy there in a really good offense. I would struggle to take Xavier Crowell this early, especially. I mean, I don't think it's going to have any long-term impact on his play, but he hasn't even been able to see the field. Of course, at the A game here recently for Alabama, he was seen in the walking boot, and I believe on a cart, right? He was on a little scooter pedaling around there. I think they said that they're being ultra cautious, but it's just too much of an unknown. I've played Devy too long, and I know the heartbreak. It's hard for me to fully invest that heavily in freshmen, but we are in the throes of rookie and freshman fever season, man. So I get it. I do anticipate that as we start doing some of these mocks continuing going forward, we're going to see his value drop. Now, I love it. Shout out our guy Panthero in the Discord. He's been holding it down for Xavier Crowell's value. I was, aggregating this data and putting it together. Shout out my man. He took Xavier Crowell in the first round of every single mock. No matter where he picked in the first, he was taking him. So that's his boy. I get it. I love him. Just slightly too early for me at his current ADP. Some wide receivers here at the bottom I want to touch on real quick. We got Nick Marsh sitting there at 14. And earlier in the last tier, when I mentioned there was some other wide receivers I'd probably take over Bo Jackson, even DeCorian Moore. These are the two that I was talking about. Bryant Wesco and Nick Marsh. I think that these guys profile as my Devy wide receiver 3, AB 3A, 3B right now. I mean, they're kind of fighting for that. I just love Nick Marsh with Kurt Signetti there at Indiana with Josh Hoover. I think that they complement each other well. We talked about it with Corey P in the last Devy Dojo episode. I think that he's a guy that could really elevate his value. So did you have any thoughts on them?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a huge Bryant Wesco guy. For me, he's more of like a deep threat. I think his best possible outcome at the NFL level is more like a Jameson Williams kind of guy, pre-breakout, we'll see. I mean, you never know where he lands and what he gets, but he has that lovely long speed that we like to see. But I would like to see a little bit more physicality out of a wide receiver, at that range, if we're taking him in the early second round of Devy drafts. I do love Nick Marsh, though. I think I'm part of the reason that he has been bumping up in this ADP. And I know that you love Nick Marsh as well. And the transfer to Indiana has been fantastic, especially with Josh Hoover, because I like Josh Hoover, who's a guy who will make an appearance very, very late in this ADP. But I think he can make fantastic throws downfield, and I think he can put the ball like right where it needs to be for his wide receiver. So I think the connection between Nick Marsh and Josh Hoover is going to be fantastic for Indiana. Obviously, we're at a point now where Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt are both getting a lot of hype, and they just won a national title at Indiana, which is insane. So we've now come to the point where Indiana is something of a powerhouse, right? Which is crazy to think about. But Nick Marsh transferring there wouldn't have made sense a year ago, but it makes a ton of sense right now, especially to be the wide receiver one when there's so many vacated targets. And we've seen him run a lot of really good routes. I don't think he's like a ginormous deep threat, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that Josh Hoover looks to all over the middle of the field.
You know how I feel about him. I do anticipate that vertical element of his game to be unlocked with Josh Hoover in this offense. I think a lot of those numbers were really affected by the environment. I mean, I saw in his real true breakout game as a freshman versus Maryland, dude went off over 160 yards at a touchdown. I mean, he was cooking these DBs on deep routes, on post routes, a lot of nuanced stuff as a young cat. And the thing that I already know, and I'm very confident about Kurt Signetti, is that he's going to put these guys in the best position to succeed. Elijah Surratt was very productive in this role, and I think that Nick Marsh can offer a lot more than Elijah Surratt did in that role. And he's a sneaky athlete. Corey P talked about his athletic testing there for C2C that they do. And of course, they do great work there with all of their athletic testing. It's a tremendous tool to use for these evaluations. So I really like him there. I think he's a little low and he's a little sneaky because people, they hear Nick Marsh and I think they're still thinking of the Michigan State version of Nick Marsh, where, you look at the production and it's not the best, it's not the greatest, but that's why it's important to pair the analytics with the film. And of course, at the Devy Dojo, the film room is our dojo and the analytics are our blade. They should perfectly complement each other for your evaluations. And that's why even looking at this, Ahmad Hardy sitting right there at the top, 9.3 ADP, sitting at the top of tier 3 here. And Ahmad Hardy is a guy that, some people aren't that impressed with. I know that Mizzou typically puts out very productive running backs, but I don't think it's fair to compare him to those past Mizzou running backs because I see a lot of NFL level stuff with him. And maybe he doesn't have elite breakaway speed, but he's got pretty damn good speed to hit long runs down the sideline. He's just an absolute destroyer of souls out there when he runs. You've seen so many times where you think you have him down and he's carrying 5 or 6 dudes en route for a touchdown. Like, he's so hard to bring down. And 2 years he had leading missed tackles forced numbers per PFF. Not number 1 overall. Of course, Ashton Genty the year before was very good. But right there, and this year he did lead the country, or I should say Power 4. He led the Power 4 in missed tackles forced per attempt and the raw number. And that just highlights what you see on film. The dude's a little more elusive than you would think. I think that he pairs that with really good vision. And I think that that's why it's not fair to compare him to past Mizzou running backs, is because of that vision. They do have a really good offensive line. I understand that. But I'm seeing him manipulate linebackers with his cuts, little head fakes, moving this way, and the ability to cut the opposite way, put the defenders on skates and then just lower his pads and knock a soul out of a dude, man. He's so much fun to watch. He's my type of running back. So it's not really shocking to me that I like him so much. That's my type of guy.
Absolutely. And I love analytics and missed tackles forced. I'm glad you highlighted that. He obviously was fantastic before he transferred to Mizzou, and he showed us that he can still do it at Mizzou against SEC talent. And he's one of those guys that does not dissuade me from being a transfer. He has proven it. We have a guy from Oregon, Makai Hughes, who we thought was going to be good last year, transferring from the group of 5 to the Power 4, and obviously didn't even get a chance really to show his stuff. And Ahmad Hardy has shown us that he can transfer and be good. So sometimes these analytics don't transfer. Sometimes they do. And missed tackles force is one of those ones that we always use as our base for, good analytics, what transfers well to the NFL. And he has shown that it's good from him, not just because of his elusiveness, but also because of his power. He can run through tackles. Missed tackles force isn't always about, dodging tackles. It's about how can you get people to shed tackles completely. We just saw that this year out of Katron Allen, my boy from Penn State, who never wanted to avoid contact. He just wanted to plow through guys, and he was one of the leaders in missed tackles forced in college football. And I think Ahmad Hardy brings a good range of, I can dodge him here and there, but I'm ready to run through guys whenever I can. So for me, he's running back 1 in the Devy landscape. I think he's got a really good future at the NFL level. I think there's a good shot for him being one of the first running backs taken in the 2027 draft.
I completely agree, man. I mean, his numbers were just fantastic. He had an elite yards after contact number, over 1,100 yards after contact, 97 missed tackles forced with over 1,600 rushing yards, 16 touchdowns. Dude's incredible. The one element in his game, obviously, that's missing is he doesn't offer much as a receiver. I think he only had like 6 catches on the year for 20 yards. It was somewhere in that neighborhood. Not very much in the receiving game, but when you have a guy that's productive, that is that productive on the ground, we've seen that type of game translate to fantasy success. And while you do want your running backs to have that receiving upside, it's not the end of the world if they're consistently getting chunk gains and touchdowns, right? If you're a powerful running back that is going to be able to break a long one for a touchdown or just get all those goal line carries, well, then that's very valuable too. I think sometimes we put too much stock in a singular trait without looking at the full frame of these players. And so that's where Ahmad Hardy fits in.
The
Moving
last
on
guy
here,
we
we'll
have
do
here is Chris Henry, right? So Chris Henry Jr. is another guy who, much like Arch Manning, has the name value behind him, and he's a guy who I am fully on board with. I think that he's certainly worthy of this ADP 13.4. I love Chris Henry Jr. Maybe it's just my background. I grew up so close to West Virginia, and I enjoyed watching his father play football. But he's tall, he's a little bit lanky, but he really runs fantastic routes. And obviously, he's going to Ohio State. And as you mentioned before, Hartline's not there anymore. But I'm not sure that that's really going to matter, because I think this guy is non worried about coaching. It's more about just get me on the field and let me be productive, because he runs fantastic routes. He's all over the field. He's not one of those typical, I guess you would like call them Tennessee wide receivers, right? The tall guys that are lanky and just run straight routes. I feel like he can do it all, man. I'm really excited about Chris Henry.
How can you not? And Ohio State does it again, right? They get a very elite recruiting talent to join, and he's probably going to start right away. I don't believe he's lost his black stripe right away, right? Yeah, I know there was another freshman that lost it, so we're still waiting on that, but that doesn't matter. Sometimes, coaches, these high-end recruits, you got to make them go out and earn it a little bit, get that humility, get the respect of the team. And from everything that we're hearing, they already know that he's next up, right? We got Jeremiah Smith now, who's going to dominate. But I mean, Chris Henry Jr. is going to be able to go out there and as a freshman be able to dominate. We just saw in these spring clips, man, he had a super nuanced diamond slant, man, that diamond release into the slant where, he went down this way, got the defender to bite because he has good eye discipline, hips, dip, he's able to move and just hit it so smooth. And for a freshman at 6'5" to be able to do that, it's very tantalizing. I know some people have been very bold in saying that he could be better than Jeremiah Smith. I'm not going to go that far. I think we need to calm down with always trying to put the next guy up above of who's there now. But he's most likely a future first-round pick in the 2029 NFL draft. That's how far away we are for him. But I love taking him here. I think that that's a really good, sweet value spot for him.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, we've talked about not taking freshmen too high, but he's a guy that I really have faith in. I've moved on to tier 4 here, and we have Bryce Underwood leading the charge. I'm sure our friend Ben is going to be very excited about that. He's a guy who I still have a lot of faith in. I think that last year was kind of a down year for him, but Michigan kind of had a down year overall, right? I still believe in Bryce Underwood. I think he's a fantastic thrower of the football. I don't know that he has exactly the rushing upside that, I've said a million times that I like, but I think that he's a very cerebral player. I think that he could get the ball down the field extremely well, and I think he reads the field very well. And he's got a newly revamped room of wide receivers, including Jamie French. Obviously, Andrew Marsh has been there, so that's a guy he already has a connection with. But I think the future of Michigan football, unfortunately for me as a Penn State guy, looks pretty good, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And Bryce Underwood is going to lead that charge, especially with a guy who I think we're going to see here very shortly, Savion Hiter, as potentially RB1.
Think that this is a good range for where he should go. I've seen him be picked as high as 104 in these drafts, and I think that that's still a little bit of that name value that he has attached to him, because his freshman season wasn't statistically that impressive, but he did enough to show to me that he's got it, right? I mean, he survived the Sharon Moore era there in Michigan, and I'm not going to get into all that tonight, but we know what that was all about. So you kind of got to give him some credit for being able to pull through that and lead his team. And of course, he was voted a captain this year. He's really taken charge. Kyle Whittingham's system there. We saw what they were able to do at Utah with Devin Dampierre, right, the quarterback. And I expect Underwood to be hopefully unleashed this season with his legs. We know what an athlete he is. He's an incredible rusher. He's great with the ball in his hands. So let's just get him the ball, let him make some plays, and really, just kind of loosen up while still developing those mechanics, which were just, abandoned last year. I don't think he had the best coaching, obviously. And so let's develop this guy and see what's there, because there's so much talent in this kid. So, I mean, I think that this is a perfect range for him. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get more spring and fall propaganda clips before the season starts, with those new receiving weapons. We had a viral clip the other day of him throwing behind the back. Of course, he was wearing a no contact jersey and stuff like that. But those ARA points, they do count in terms of their artificial value. So I think that that's why you've seen him stay relatively steady. He's going a little lower than he was at this time last season as a true freshman, but he hasn't fallen too far. And he's been a pretty good buy, honestly, because a lot of people are a little lower than him, lower than they should be on Bryce Underwood. But looking right underneath him there, Chris, we got Jaden Baugh, and everybody knows who's listened to the Devy Dojo my love for Jaden Baugh. I feel like people are starting to finally catch on. I mean, maybe a hot take here. I think that he's got a great chance to push for Devy RB1. I really do. And I know I've said that about another back, but this is the guy that if I'm putting my money on a horse, Jaden Baugh profiles as a guy who could really translate to some success at the next level. 6'1", 228, 231 pounds, depending on where you look, with tremendous athleticism and the ability to make a defender miss or just plow him over. And he's got very underrated receiving chops out of the backfield. So we'll see in this new offense. They've talked about, look, if Jaden Baugh got 25 carries last season, we need to bump that up to 30, right? And so they're talking about just really funneling the offense through him at times. So if that's true, that's coach speak. We'll see if they actually follow through. We could really, really see his ADP and his overall value really skyrocket.
Yeah, I love that take. You've been beating the drum for Baugh for quite a while now. He's got that big body, one of those guys who is going to translate well to the NFL as far as his size at the running back position. But I do agree that I would like to see a little bit more receiving chops out of him.
We got one of the biggest risers this offseason. Now sitting there, Ryan Coleman Williams, now at 16.9. He's a guy that you've seen a lot of variance in where he's selected in these mocks. Obviously the drop issues persisted his first 2 seasons. He didn't have those.
Eczema is unpredictable, but you can flare less with Ebglyss, a once-monthly treatment for moderate to severe eczema. After an initial 4-month or longer dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Fancy highlight moments in the second season. He was really relegated to kind of the second option in that passing attack last season. But now, look, a year makes a difference. He's bulked up a little bit. He just got engaged. He's not a kid anymore. He's a little older. He's 19 now. He changed his name, changed his number back to his high school number. He added the Coleman to honor his mother's last name. So new year, new him, right? And he tore it up in spring practice. He had a 3-touchdown day with some viral clips on social media. And that you started to immediately see his ADP climb in real time, right? People started taking him higher and higher. And I think that this is a really good spot for him. If he's really taking that next step, like Ty Simpson said at his pro day, he said, look at him, man, he's grown up. He's big dog in that offense now. Like, he's a leader on this team. And, maybe Keelan Russell wins the battle. It looks like after the A game, that's going to be the quarterback. I think that those two could have a really good chemistry, and I expect a big bounce back year, hopefully, for Ryan Coleman Williams.
Yeah, for me, I'm still out because of the drops last year. And because, I feel like we've talked about Ryan Williams a whole bunch, and Jeremy Bernard, who I love. Obviously Jeremy Bernard is going to the NFL draft. This is too high for me to take Williams because of the drops. However, I have seen some statistics that drops don't necessarily mean that you're not going to be good at the NFL level. So we'll see. I think that the talent obviously is still there. We've we've talked a million times about his freshman year and how great he was, and he was only 17. So
yeah,
I like that. I'm an intangibles guy. If you're going to add your mother's last name to try to give you a little reboot, reset the system, and he's going to have a new quarterback, which is hopefully Keelon Russell. It starts to seem like that's going to be the case after their spring game this weekend. So maybe he gets good connection with Keelon Russell, and he becomes the wide receiver one that we all thought he was, a year ago when he was going in the top 5 picks of Devy drafts. We'll see. It's still a little bit high for me, but this is a good guy to gamble on. I think that he's got a lot of talent still locked in there somewhere. He's just got to shake off the sophomore year because it wasn't great for him.
Yeah.
Moving on, we got JKS, who I didn't even put his entire name on the graphic because I
can't fit it.
I can't even say it. So, but JKS, another guy who I think is a very talented quarterback, coming out of Cal, but we've talked about it before. Quarterbacks are not guys that I'm necessarily willing to take this high. For me, I think this is pretty high for him.
Interesting. I agree to an extent with that. Obviously, quarterbacks, you want to push down, but I mean, this is what, mid-second round right here. With a guy with his profile, with how mechanically sound he was as a true freshman, a starting true freshman at that, I'm willing to invest in this pony. And by the way, Chris, it's Jaren Keawe-Sagapolutele, man. You gotta learn the name, man.
See,
he's the next.
That's why I have
thing.
you.
Come on. I mean, look. I was in on him. He's a southpaw with average arm talent. Of course, I'm going to be in. That's my type, man. We talked about it, but no, I mean, they added some weapons. The Calgorithm did their thing. All those rich Cal boosters. You haven't seen good football played in a long time. They had to invest to keep JKS there, and he's there for this season. We'll see about later on. Don't kill me, Cal fans. I brought it up earlier, and I got absolutely
Dylan Raiola's at Oregon, so he's not leaving for Oregon at this point.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, good point. So I do think he's going to stay there. I think he's invested in the program. They've put some decent talent around him. I know they added Ian Strong to the wide receiver room, which I don't necessarily believe in him as a Devy talent, but he's better than what they had last year overall. So
Agreed.
We'll see. I just trust the talent there. But looking at some of these other guys, man, you got Justice Haynes, Tristan Keys, another freshman, Julian Sayin. What do you think about the ranges for these guys? I know Justice Haynes, I'm probably taking a little bit earlier, the proximity to the draft. You got that freshman and another quarterback, Chris. So what
I would agree. I think Julian Sayin's a guy I'd rather take over JKS at this point because a lot of the things we've talked about, he's a fantastic. He's shown in his 1 year of starting that he knows how to play ball. Like, he's just a good quarterback. I think it's almost guaranteed that he's going to get first round capital if he continues his ball playing the way he has. Justice Haynes is like a weird specimen at this point because he kind of downgraded as far as transfers goes, but I know that that's his home team, Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech obviously has had a great running program.
Yes,
we like Justice Haynes at the dojo. It's just weird to evaluate a guy who went from Michigan to Georgia Tech, but I still believe in him as an NFL talent. I still think he has the Homer and Haynes talent. And I think he's going to really this is a guy that is an easy first rounder in C2C leagues, right? You got to take him early in C2C because he's going to put up some numbers. So we'll see where he ultimately ends up. I think this is a fine spot to take him back end of the second round in Devy because a lot of these running backs you're just kind of guessing on, where are they going to end up after their production this year? Where are they going to end up in the NFL draft? I do like Justice Haynes a lot. Interestingly enough, later on, we're going to talk about Jordan Marshall later in this ADP, and I'm certain that Justice Haynes is a better prospect than Jordan Marshall. And I like Jordan Marshall, but even with him transferring down,
I think that Jordan Marshall, Savion Hiter, they're going to complement each other well. There's been some rumblings that Hiter possibly was the reason that Justice Haynes transferred. I don't know. On3 put out a really good article, a VIP article the other day, talking kind of about some of the rationale behind Justice Haynes transferring. Of course, you talked about it being his hometown, but also he's going to have the opportunity to really show the receiving element of his game. And that was something that, Chris, for a long time, you have always highlighted, that even though statistically we might not see the receiving output that we would like to see, we always thought, and especially you always thought, that he had the ability. He just wasn't being asked to do it at Michigan. So I'm low-key getting kind of excited about this move to Georgia Tech. If he can show that element of his game, he still has the talent to be a day 2 back, somewhere in that mid second to third round, I think, which is really good draft capital for running backs. And we've talked about the home run ability. We already know he offers that. So I love that. And then looking at Tristan Keys, man, even Julian saying, I love these spots. I do agree with you saying I would take Julian Sain over JKS right now. And I'm not in love with Julian Sain by any means, but he's going to get the national exposure. He's going, playing a lot of big time games. He's got great weapons. His value might be a little higher to the common person out there. And with sometimes quarterbacks like that, that's a profile I'm probably looking to flip for an NFL asset or something else if I can. So I think that I would take him, most likely with the intention to trade, because he also doesn't offer the rushing upside. Neither him or JKS do. So I'd be okay with that. And then Tristan Keys, I've seen him in other drafts outside of the dojo taken even lower. And I think a lot of it is the Tennessee stigma. Look, it wasn't that long ago. He was really seen as wide receiver 1 in this wide receiver recruiting class over Chris Henry Jr. And then you know how recruiting services do, man. Committed to Tennessee, saw him bump down. Chris Henry Jr. goes to Ohio State. Now he's number 1. So there's politics and narratives stuff. So I like that, and I think that that's good value. But let's go ahead and move on to the other tier. We got some other big names to talk about.
We just talked about him, Savion Hiter. I think that there's a lot of buzz, man. I just saw something today. I think it was in the Dojo Discord, actually, that he might take over Jordan Marshall, running back 1 at Michigan, by like September. And he is a really fantastic athlete. He's, we're talking about Tristan Keys. I would much rather take a chance on this freshman than Tristan Keys, at that ADP in the back end of the second round. I think that he's a really, really talented running back. And I think it's easier to translate those running back talents when you start looking at high school film and you're looking at these guys. Obviously, he was like a highly, highly sought out recruit, but he looks like he can do it all, man. I'm low key excited for him. I actually didn't put him on the all the other graphics. I put the top guy on the the picture, but I didn't want to put him because I didn't want to do back-to-back Michigan guys. But I am low key excited for him.
When you say that you're excited about Hiter, I am too. And I'm still kind of struggling who to put as running back 1 in this recruiting class between him and Crowell. And I think that this is a price that I'm comfortable paying for one of these guys. I think Hiter likely is going to be the more productive running back year 1. I still have questions about Kalen DeBoer in that offense, how he can utilize a running game and that offensive line. So I would much rather pass on Crowell in first round and take Hiter here at 21, pick 21. We've talked a lot about him, man. He's pretty shifty for a big guy, but runs with power. I really like him, man. And obviously you have Dallas Wilson right there. That's a guy who has maintained value pretty well, considering he hasn't been the most healthy guy right out there. He's missed a lot of time with injury. Even now, like during the spring, he's missed time with some soft tissue stuff. So we're really going off that big breakout game. I believe it was versus Texas, where he really just balled out, man. But he's got the physical profile that you love. It's honestly going to hinge a lot for me on how I feel about him just for this season, for like C2C and things like that. How I feel about him. Is he going to pair well with whoever the quarterback is? Is it going to be Tramel Jones? After the spring game, he looked the best out there. And then you got Vernell Brown, who I think is really underrated. So we have a lot of questions about the Gators this year, but if you're investing in a young, talented wide receiver, I think at this range, Dallas Wilson is a pretty good one to go on. And I've seen you, Chris, take Dallas Wilson pretty high in these mock drafts. So I'm assuming you're pretty high on Dallas Wilson.
I still am, because I believe in the overall profile. I love when you get a guy that's got that physical talent, and I think that he has that ability. When it translates to the NFL to, go toe to toe with cornerbacks against press coverage and just fight your way through and anything that's in front of you. I think that he can have that yak ability as far as just being able to dominate the lower level guys, the cornerbacks and linebackers that are going to be lineup safeties that are a little bit smaller than him, that are going to try to disrupt his routes. I think he's got that. He's already shown that his 50-50 ability running up, going up to get the catch is great, but I think that extra step as far as physicality against defenses is going to translate well. And of course, you said his injuries have kind of lowered his overall profile a little bit, but for me, he's still a top 10 Devy wide receiver. So I've been grabbing him a little bit here in the back end of the second round for sure in these Devy mocks. And we have here at the bottom of this tier a couple of guys who have moved up from North Texas to Oklahoma State, Drew Mestamaker and Caleb Hawkins. And I did a whole profile on Caleb Hawkins last year, who I feel like is underrated. He's a fantastic running back. He does all the things that you want to. And much like we just talked about with Ahmad Hardy, it's going to be, can you translate to a higher level of talent? But that's the real question that I'm asking for Drew Mestamaker, because he dominated last year. He led the entire NCAA in yards and I think touchdowns as well. Mm-hmm. He was just fantastic. And now he's moving to Oklahoma State with both his running back and his offensive coordinator and his wide receiver one. So it's laid out, man. Like, if you're not going to produce at this point, you just don't have it. So I get why people are taking Drew Mestamaker here. I don't know that I'm quite ready to take him at the top half of the third round, but he's fun, dude. Why not, right?
Yeah, he's the best story in college football. 0-star recruit. Didn't play any varsity snaps at quarterback in high school. He played safety in high school, but he wasn't out there starting at the varsity level at quarterback. And then to just go out there and dominate. And Eric Morris, we know the story, man. Like, just kind of stumbled upon this kid. He had a Patrick Mahomes trainer be like, hey, look, like, I got this kid I'm working with who he's the next big thing in the NFL. All right, send me his game tape, Eric Morris said. That's the thing. He didn't actually play in high school. And then to see what he was able to do, we'll see if it translates. I think that the Big 12 conference is a good litmus test for him, right? It's a big jump still, but there's still some lighthearted defenses in the Big 12. And I know they've been more competitive overall. I think the Big 12 is getting better, but still comparatively to the Big 10, to the SEC, I think that this is a good test for him. So I'm really interested to see how that works. A guy that I've been really high on, Chris, is Darian Mensah. Now, this is a guy whose tape for C2C I fell in love with at Tulane when he finally became the starter. Entering that year, I think he was third on the depth chart, and then he just won the job in spring and fall and became the starter there in his second season. And then now you've seen him transfer to Duke, really broke out, and now he's taking that Cam Ward path almost, and now ultimately ending at Miami. He has a chance to really elevate his stock. Got a great offensive line to protect him. He's got Mark Fletcher to hand the ball and keep defenses honest. And then, of course, he's got the aforementioned Malachi Toney to throw to, and former Duke teammate Cooper Barkay, wide receiver transfer as well. So he's got some familiarity. I think that the vertical element in his game, he throws such a good deep ball. Like, when his mechanics are right, his balls are tight, man. And that's pause. All right, pause a little bit on that one.
Tight balls.
But it's beautiful out there, man, to see him. The arm talent on this kid is really incredible. So I'm really excited to see how he pairs. And then, of course, we talked about Keelon Russell a little bit, and it looks like he's likely to be quarterback one in the system. And that is very exciting, because in his class, I loved Bryce Underwood, but Keelon Russell was the guy that I really invested in. He was slightly cheaper than Bryce Underwood was, and he's still cheaper than him now. And I think that pairing with Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer, if they can keep him healthy and upright, it's looking really good. Look, he's got a fellow freshman Sedarian Morgan there now too. Ryan Coleman Williams, he's got a litany of weapons out there to throw to, and he's got a rushing ability that we haven't seen. We didn't see with Ty Simpson last year, obviously, not to this degree. A common comp for Keelon Russell coming out of high school was like a young Jaden Daniels, maybe not the pure straight line speed of him, but kind of that thinner frame with rushing upside. but great mechanics in the pocket, a tremendous throwing motion and great release. And he could put some zip on the ball. Like this kid is a natural thrower of the football with that mobility. And so I think we're going to see some more RPO concepts that Kalen DeBoer likes to run. And if the offensive line is still shaky, well, he might want that more mobile quarterback option out there. So I love this value for Keelon Russell. We've started to see it climb, right? Obviously, when we were doing these mocks, some of the first ones, he's in the battle with Austin Mack, and it's still undecided, and it's probably going to go on for a while. So you've seen his price kind of just stay here. And now with this news in the A game, you're starting to see it climb. And I expect to continue to see it climb because he's a guy that the community loves, and for good reason.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm excited for DeBoer to finally have a guy that can like really, really run. Because, the last few years we've seen Ty Simpson, who can't really run a whole lot. We've seen Michael Penix, who really can't run too much. So giving him an option to like actually open up the offense a little bit more with the running game, I think is going to be great. I think that's why Keelan Russell has a little bit of the edge in this this quarterback battle. Even though we like Austin Mack a little bit, Keelan Russell is obviously the best Devy asset, and we've been waiting for him. We've been sitting on him. He's been on our Devy top 10, top 12s for a little bit while. There's nothing but good things ahead for Keelan Russell if he can take this job.
I completely agree with that. And, you touched on Kalen DeBoer not having that mobile quarterback option, and it's true to a degree. I mean, obviously he had Ty Simpson last year. He had Michael Penix at Washington. He did have Jalen Milroe for a little bit at Bama, but Jalen Milroe wasn't the natural thrower of the football that Keelan Russell is. So when you have the best of both worlds, when you have a guy who wants to win in the pocket first and then maybe extend the play or take what the defense is giving him, even take advantage of some design runs, I think that's what's going to set him apart. And that's no shade at Austin Mack. Obviously, I think that he's a pretty good, decent option too. I'm not quite as sold for his Devy and NFL future upside, but I mean, he's been in the system. I think this is his 4th year, and Austin Mack is still just 19 years old because he reclassified and, he was a young guy coming in and all that. But I think I'd rather selfishly see Keelon Russell out there for sure.
Definitely pull up the rest of the ADPs. So this isn't by ADP, it's just by order of ADP. And if you're listening on the Spotify or wherever else you like to listen to podcasts, you got to come to YouTube so you can see this beautiful list that we have created of the rest of the ADP all the way through the 96th player, not quite 100. But yeah, we don't need to go over all these players, but it's interesting. I think that Trey'Dez Green was so close to being in our tier 5 based on ADP. Trey'Dez Green is a guy who obviously, as far as tight end talent, is one of the better ones we've seen, I think, in college. And obviously he's got one more year of college, but I'm surprised he didn't go a little bit higher. And I know that that's partially our fault because we're always talking about how tight ends are not great, but with all these current NFL leagues, dynasty leagues playing with tight end premium, I thought he would be a little bit higher.
I mean, maybe we'll see, going forward. If he goes out and balls out this year with Lane Kiffin, Colin plays at LSU, Sam Levitt throwing on the ball, we'll see. I'm actually okay with it, Chris. I'm still of that mindset. Like, I don't really, if I have the opportunity to draft him in this slot, I'd consider it, but I'm probably looking at another position, just to be completely honest with you. And we don't need to go through all of these, Chris. I think we've gone on long enough. If you want to pause the screen and look at this, or I am going to write a Substack article going a little more in depth on some of these other guys too. So make sure that you tapped in with us here at the dojo to get access to all of that. Again, going on your screen, you see here Harlem Berry 61, Charlie Becker 62. Chris, is one that I was thinking is too low, and maybe I'm just much higher on Charlie Becker than consensus. I don't know. Some people in the Discord were telling me that I'm, a little lower than other people in the community. Apparently some people are ranking him very, very high, but I think that Charlie Becker should definitely be taken in 1 or 2 tiers higher than this. I really loved what he did last year at Indiana. And again, with Nick Marsh there, Josh Hoover, I think that Indiana doesn't skip a beat. And down the stretch and in the playoffs, you saw Charlie Becker making some insane catches. And I've seen others knock him for athleticism. I mean, Maybe he doesn't have the straight line speed. Maybe we just define athleticism different, because if I see you, elbows above your eyes, outstretching the defender, falling backwards into the end zone and making the play, well, that's pretty damn athletic to me, So it just depends on how you define athleticism. I want to remind the viewers that separation occurs more than just one way. Separation can occur vertically too. When you do it right and you have a quarterback that can place it in the right spot, it is absolutely a weapon. You young cats just aren't used to seeing it in today's NFL, but we know the cyclical nature of the NFL, and there is a need for that type of wide receiver with how offenses are trending going forward. So he's a guy that I'm all in on. I would love to see him go a little higher. Is there anybody to you, Chris, that stuck out on this list that we need to talk about before we get out of here?
A couple freshmen here who I feel like are a little bit underrated, because freshmen are tough to evaluate, especially with Devy. But we talked about some of those guys that were in the top 20 ADP, but like Faison Brandon, I think is a really good quarterback who's a little bit underrated. Like Diabell here is much higher on the ADP. I think Faison Brandon is flying under the radar. Like you said, maybe it's the Tennessee bias. I don't know, but I think he's a really good quarterback.
Go ahead and tell us in the comments who you liked in these additional tiers. Of course, in this last one, we have John Mateer, Damon Williams, KJ Duff, Cameron Dickey, and Dylan Raiola, who I think is a very sneaky value play to gain. Obviously, he's taking the Dante Moore route, right? He's going to sit a year and learn under Dante Moore, right? Oregon has really shown this ability to take on these transfer quarterbacks and develop them properly. Like, Oregon's starting to become known as a developer of these quarterbacks, which has to be exciting if you're a Ducks fan. So I like him as the very last player taken here in our ADP. Sneaky value.
Completely agree. 98th overall. Like, dude, take him a little bit earlier than that. Sneak him in there. It's Devy. Just let him sit on your lineup, because I think he's still got talent. I've talked about him before when he was in Nebraska. Obviously, last year didn't go quite as well as we thought, but I love this move for him to take a year off and sit behind a good quarterback and know that his future is going to be as the quarterback of the Oregon Ducks.
We've been yapping enough, man. I think that we were just excited to get back here in the dojo and talk about these guys. So it was a blast, man. You're one of my good friends, and anytime we can link up and just talk ball, man, it's always a good time. I hope that you, the viewer, really enjoyed this episode as well. And if you want to continue these conversations or even get in some of the mock drafts that have been shaping this ADP, then you need to join the free Devy Dojo Discord. Again, the link's going to be in the description of this video. You're going to see it popping all around on screen. So make sure that you join. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter. You can find me at Devy Sensei, and I have a link tree there with everything that we are putting out. So make sure to join and be a part of the dojo. We will see you next week. Probably a couple times. We're ramping up for the rookie draft in the NFL, so we're definitely going to be talking about some of that, as well as I think it's time, Chris, that we release a little teaser of some of our official Devy rankings. So be on the lookout for those going forward. Remember to trust your training.